Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, and you're listening to BriefingsDirect. Our business innovation thought leadership discussion today focuses on the heightened role and impact of procurement as a strategic business force. We'll explore how intelligent procurement is rapidly transforming from an emphasis on cost savings to creating new business value and enabling supplier innovations. As the so-called digital enterprise adapts to a world of increased collaboration, data access, and business networks, procurement leaders can have a much bigger impact both inside and outside of their companies. To learn more about the future of procurement as a focal point of integrated business services, we're joined by two guests. We're here with Kurt Albertson, Principal of Advisory Services at the Hackett Group in Atlanta. Welcome, Kurt.
Thank you, Dana.
We're also joined by Dr. Marcel Fulmer, Chief Operating Officer at Ariba at SAP Company and former Chief Procurement Officer at SAP. Welcome, Marcel.
Many thanks, Dana, for having me. Great being here.
You must be seeing external forces having an impact on your company and on Ariba's customers. We're looking at mobile devices being used more and more for business. We have connected business networks. How are these trends impacting procurement of all things, and why is procurement perhaps going to have a bigger impact as time goes on?
Thanks, Dana. That's a very good question. I see a couple of disruptive trends which are very important and impacting directly procurement. Smartphones, tablets, we see how this has changed the way how we work on a daily basis. Not to forget big data, Internet of Things, Industry 4.0. So I think there are a lot of technology trends out there which are very important. On the other side, we see also completely new business models taking off. Uber, so the largest taxi company, without having and owning one single cab. Airbnb, basically the same, largest accommodation provider in the meantime, by not owning a single bed. And we see also companies like WhatsApp, Skype, WeChat, so they are not owning the infrastructure anymore, what we know from the past. I could mention a couple of more like Alibaba, probably everybody knows the highest IPO in history, what has been done, market capitalization from around 200 billion, and they even don't have an inventory. So these are really fundamental changes what we see, the technology side on the one side and then the new business models. When we now see what is the impact here for procurement, I think it is fair to say that when business models are changing, also procurement needs to change. And we see this, that companies intend to simplify the way they do business today. We see a lot of complex processes, what we have, a lot of complex business models. Today, it needs to be Apple easy and Google fast. This is simply what millennials expect in the market. But it's also that we see that procurement as a function itself is more transforming from a service to function. And this is definitely also one trend, what we see here, that more and more different strategic impact, what is asked from the lines of business to procurement, is more and more important and come on the agenda for the procurement function. Let me add the last topic, the evolution of the CPO role, by saying that, seeing the different trends in the market, seeing also the different requirements indicated by the trends for procurement, I think the role of procurement as well as the CPO role in the 21st century will definitely change. The Chief Procurement Officer role might evolve and might be a Chief Collaboration Officer role, or even in the future, as we see the focus is more and more on the business value, a Chief Value Officer role, which might be the next big step.
Yes, thank you. Now, Kurt, we're hearing a lot from Marcel about, I guess, virtual enterprises. When we say that a major retailer doesn't have an inventory, or a hotel rooms coordinator and provider doesn't have any beds, we're really now talking about relationships. We're talking about insight and knowledge rather than the physical goods. Does that map in some way to the role of the Chief Procurement Officer? How is a virtual enterprise impacted, and how does a procurement process change in accordance with that?
Yeah, thanks, Dana. And Marcel brought up some great points. Let me reference Hackett being a quantitative-based organization. Let me share with you some of the insights from a recent, very recent, like 2 weeks ago, key issue study that we did for 2016. And this is a study we do each year, looking forward across the market, and we're usually talking with the head of procurement about where the focus is, what's the priority, what's going to have the biggest impact on success. What capabilities are they building out? So let me just start at a high level here. A lot of the things that Marcel talked about in terms of elevating procurement's role and more collaboration and driving more value, we saw it quite strongly in 2015, and we see it quite strongly in 2016. When we looked in 2015, actually, when we did our key issue study, the number one objective of the procurement executive was to elevate the role of procurement to what we call a trusted advisor. And certainly you've heard that term before, and we actually put a very solid definition around it. But let me just say, achieving the role of a trusted advisor in itself is not the end game, but it does allow you to do other things like reduce cost, tap suppliers for innovation, become more agile as an organization, which was in the top 5 for procurement as well. Of procurement objectives. So when we look at this concept of the trusted advisor role of procurement, it's really about how do we, just as Marcel said, it's really about a lot of the procurement executives across multiple industries are really saying, how do we change the perception of procurement within the eyes of the stakeholders so that we can do more higher value type activities? And for example, if you're focusing on cost, we talk a lot about the quantity of spend influence versus the quality of spend influence. And in fact, in our forum in October of this year, we had a very, very good discussion on that with our client base. We used to measure success of the procurement organization, certainly by cost savings, but also one of the key metrics a lot of our clients would look at is percent of spend influenced by procurement. But interesting enough, if you ask a lot of people, we have a fair formal definition around that, but when you ask everybody, you'll get a different definition from them in terms of how they define spend influence. So what we've realized, as world-class organizations are in the 95% range and 90% plus on the indirect side, non-world-class procurement organizations are lagging, in the 70% range in terms of influence. Where do we go from here? And it's got to be about the quality of the spend influence. And what our data shows very clearly is world-class organizations, they are involved during the requirements and planning stages with their internal stakeholders much more often than non-world-class organizations, who are frankly usually involved either once a supplier has been identified or certainly to the most part at least once requirements are identified and the stakeholder already knows what they want. That's a really good, in both cases you're influencing, but in the world-class case, you're doing a much better job of quality of influence, and you can open up tremendous amounts of value. It changes the discussion with your internal stakeholders from, hey, we're here to, go out and competitively bid and help you get the best price, to, hey, let's have a conversation with what you are trying to achieve, and then let's help you go figure out with our knowledge and relationships and tool sets that we have around the supply markets and managing those supply markets, let us help you, get more value in terms of what you're trying to achieve. And a big component of that, when we ask organizations, okay, well, how do we become a trusted advisor? And we built out some frameworks around that. One of the key things is exactly what you just talked about. In fact, we did a kind of a forward-looking 10-year out procurement 2025 vision piece of research that we published a few months ago. And big data and analytics was a key component of that. And a big component of that is when we look at big data, a lot of the things Marcel already talked about, look, most procurement groups aren't very good at even doing basic spend analytics. Even with all the great solutions that are out there and processes, still when we look out in the market, there's still a lot of companies where they don't have line item level detail or they don't have, kind of a 90, 95% plus data quality with respect to spend analytics. We need to move way beyond that for procurement to really elevate its role within the organization. We need to bring we need to be looking out there at all the big data that's out there in these supply networks and across these supply networks and across to a lot of other sources of information. Everything, you got PDAs, you've got all kinds of information. We need to be constructively pulling that information together in a way that then allows us to marry it up with our internal information and do more analysis with that and come up and synthesize that data and then turn it over and sit down and provide it to our internal stakeholders in a way that's meaningful for them, in a way that's insightful, so that they can, then see how their businesses are going to be impacted by a lot of the trends out in the supply markets. Quite interesting, when we look at, and on that note, quite interesting, when we look at, we asked a question this year, which I thought was interesting. We asked which trends will have the greatest transformational impact on the way procurement performs its job over the next decade. I'm shocked. 3 out of the top 5 have to do with technology: predictive analytics and forecasting tools, cloud computing, and mobility. The other 2, the global economy and millennial workforce. So mobility, predictive analytics, and forecasting and cloud computing are in the top 3, or in the top 5, along with the global economy and the millennial workforce. 2 other major topics that were in our forward-looking Procurement 2025 paper. So when we look at the trend that's going to have the greatest transformational impact, it is predictive analytics and forecasting tools in terms of how procurement performs its job over the next 10 years. That's big. Consider the fact that we aren't very good at just doing the basics around spend analytics right now, and we're saying we need to get a lot better to be able to predict what's going to happen in the future in terms of budgets based on what we expect to happen in supply markets and economies. We need to put in the hands of our stakeholders tool sets that they can then look at their business objectives and understand what's happening in the supply market, how that might impact it in 2 to 3 years. That way, when you look at some of the industries out there, when your revenue gets cut in more than half, almost within a year, you have a plan in place that you can then go execute on to take out cost in a strategic way as opposed to just taking a broad axe and kind of trying to take out that cost.
Interesting. So being much smarter, much more analytic, and being proactive rather than reactive to what's going on inside your company. It's interesting, Kurt, because I talk to a lot of IT people, and they're doing more with the data and the analysis, and they want to elevate it to more people in the organization, like the chief procurement officer. It seems to me like Ariba is in a position to bridge these groups between what IT or data providers can bring out in terms of analysis and what these chief procurement officers are going to need in order to do their jobs differently. Marcel, do you see that? Do you see Ariba playing a role of the bridge between technology and business processes that the CPOs are going to be looking to have more insight from?
Absolutely, Dana. I think I couldn't agree more what Kurt said about the importance of the top priorities today. And I think it is very important also by seeing what do you really want to do with the data. Basically, first of all, you need technology. You need to get access to all the different sources of information what you have in a company. And when we see now today how difficult it is, and I couldn't echo exactly what Kurt said about the challenges also what a lot of procurement functions have, not even capable in getting the basic data to drive procurement, to do spend analytics, and then also to see that they really link this to supply chain data, what is needed. In the future, this will definitely change. But when you think about what you can do with the data by predictive analytics and then say, okay, a good time to buy based on the cycle we have seen is this time frame, and this should give you a good time to take a purchase decision and go to the market. And what do you need to do that? You need the right tools, you need spend visibility tools, you need access to the data to drive end-to-end transparency on all the data what you have for the entire source-to-pay process.
Okay, another thing that we're expecting to see more of in 2016 is collaboration between procurement inside an organization and suppliers, and finding perhaps new ideas for how to do things, whether it's marketing, product design. So Kurt, do you have any data that supports this idea that this is not just a transaction, that there's in fact collaboration between partners, and that can have quite an impact on the role and value that the procurement officer and their charges bring back to their companies?
Yeah, so let me just kind of tie it into the conversation that we've been having, Marcel and I have been having already. When we look at this idea of a trusted advisor, obviously we just talked about a lot of data and analytics and how putting that in the hand of procurement folks so that they can then go have conversations and be really advisors in terms of helping enable business strategies as opposed to just, looking at historical spend cost analysis, for example. That helps procurement category managers raise their game and really be perceived as adding more value, becoming this trusted advisor. And when we look at one of the kind of the most common discussions that Hackett works with, hundreds of global 1,000 organizations, and probably still one of the most common discussions we have, and even on-site, kind of training support that we do, is around strategic category management. So kind of switching the game from strategic sourcing, which we view as an end-step process that results in awarding a piece, competitive bid process through aggregation of spend and awarding a contract, to really a more formal category management framework that pulls a whole set of broader value levers that you can pull to drive value, including supplier relationship management, which includes working with suppliers to innovate, and impacting a much broader set of value objectives that our stakeholders have, including spend cost reduction, but not only including spend cost reduction. So, just the fact that we see such a level of interest in category management today, and when we look at kind of our key issue study again in 2016, when we look at the capability building that organizations are rolling out, we actually see kind of this. We've been seeing this shift from strategic sourcing to category management. So strategic sourcing as a capability was always number one. It still is, but now it's actually number two is this category management framework. So basically, if you think of those two as bookends, with category management being a much more mature framework than just strategic sourcing. 80-some% of companies said category management is a key capability that they need to use to drive procurement's objectives. And that's because they're impacting a broader set of value objectives. Now, the value levers they're pulling really are around innovation and supplier relationship management. In fact, kind of an interesting thing, if you look at our 2016 key issue study again, tapping supplier innovation is actually a little bit further on down the list. It's actually somewhere around 10. So when we look at all the things that are there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it's actually ninth on the list, with 55% of procurement executives saying, it's a critical or major importance for us. The interesting thing, though, is if you look and go back to 2015 and compare where that is versus 2016, 2016, that moves nearly into the top 3 with respect to the significantly more focus on a key capability. So what that tells us is companies really, and SRM has been a hot topic for our clients for a long time, but this tells us it's getting more and more important. So, yeah, we're seeing a lot of organizations still with very informal kind of supply relationship management, supply innovation frameworks in place. And it's done within the organization, but it's done haphazardly by individuals within the business and key stakeholders. And a lot of times not necessarily that activity is aligned with where it can drive the most value. It's quite common when we work with a company and they say, yeah, these are our top suppliers, top 5 suppliers we want to innovate with. And you start talking about, well, if innovation is your objective, either to drive cost reduction or to help improve the market effectiveness of your products or services and drive greater revenue, whatever the reason you're doing that, if that's your objective, are these suppliers going to get you there? And probably 7 out of 10 times people come back to us and say, well, no, we picked these suppliers because they were the largest impact, spend impact suppliers. But when you start talking about supplier innovation, they freely admit that there's no way that supplier is going to engage with them in any kind of innovation. So we have to rethink how we look at our supply base and really understand where are those suppliers that can truly move the needle on supplier innovation, and engage them through a category management framework that pulls the value lever of SRM in a way and then track the benefits associated with that. And as I said, looking at our 2016 key issues study, supplier innovation was the fastest growing in terms of its focus objective that we saw when we asked the procurement executives.
So, Marcel, back to you. It sounds as if the idea of picking a supplier is not just a cost equation, that there's a qualitative part to that. And how would you automate and scale that in a large organization? It sounds to me like you need a business network of some sort where organizations can lay out much more freely what it is that they are providing as a service, and then making those services actually hook up, a collaboration function. Is that something you're seeing at Ariba as well, that the business network is helping procurement move from a transactional cost equation to a much richer set of services?
Absolutely, Dana. So business network plays a key role for us, for our business strategy, but also on how to help companies to simplify their complexity. When you reach out, for example, to a marketplace, you are looking for things. You are probably also starting discussions, getting additional information that you are not necessarily looking for the paint, what you need in the automotive industry, or the color of a car. No, you probably also think about why not getting a ready painted car as a service at the end. This is a very simple example, but now think about when you go for the next level on how really to evolve and have a technology partnership where you reach out to suppliers, looking for new suppliers by getting more and more information, and also asking others, probably having already done similar things. When you do this on a network, you get probably responses from suppliers you would not even have thought about that they have capabilities like that. And this is a process where I believe what in the future will count to do successfully the transformation to a more value-focused procurement function. And simplicity is definitely here key. You need to run simple, you need to focus on your business, and you need to get rid of the complexity. You can't have all the information and do everything on your own. You need to focus on your core competencies and help the business getting whatever they need to be successful from the suppliers, the right suppliers, out in the market to ensure you get the best price for the desired quality and ensure in-time delivery. The magic triangle of procurement, not a big secret. In the procurement world, everybody knows it is not possible really to optimize everything. So therefore, you need to find the right mix, and you need also to be agile to work with suppliers in a different way by not only focusing just on the price, which a lot of operational technical procurement functions are used to. You need now to see that what do you really want to achieve as a business outcome. And on a network, you can get the help from suppliers, from the collaboration side also, in finding the right ones to drive business value for your organization.
Okay, another major area that we're expecting significant change in 2016 is around the use of procurement as a vehicle for risk reduction. And so having this visibility using networks, elevating the use of data analysis, everything we've talked about, in addition to cost efficiencies, in addition to bringing innovation to play between suppliers and consumers at the industrial scale, it seems to me that we're getting insight deeply into supply chains and able to therefore head off a variety of risks around security, around the ability to keep supply chains healthy and functioning, and unknown factors that could arise that would damage even an entire company's reputation. So, Kurt, do you have some data, some findings that would illustrate or reinforce this idea that procurement as a function, and chief procurement officers in particular, can play a much greater role in the ability to detect risk and prevent bad things from happening to companies?
Yeah, thanks, Dana. So again, I'll go back to the 2016 key issues study and talk about objectives. Reducing supply continuity risk is actually number 6 on the list, and there's a long list, so that's pretty important. And then obviously a little bit further down, we see things like regulatory noncompliance risk. It's certainly more aligned with certain industries than others. Just from a perspective, yeah, we see this as certainly number 6 on the list of Procurement 2016 objectives. And the question is, okay, what do we do about it? Well, there's another objective which I kind of talked about earlier, which is called improve agility, which is actually number 4 on the list for Procurement 2016 objectives. I kind of look at risk management and procurement agility kind of go hand in hand. And the way data helps support that is getting access to better information, really understanding where those risks are, and then being able to quickly respond, hopefully mitigate those risks. Ideally, we want to mitigate risk, and we want to be able to tap the suppliers themselves and the supply network to do it. In fact, when we look at kind of this idea of supply risk management, we've actually at Hackett in our 2025 procurement study actually kind of rebranded that as supplier network management. It's really about going beyond and just looking at a particular supplier and looking at all the suppliers that are out there in the network, their suppliers, so on and so forth, but then also tapping all the other partners that are participating in those networks and using them to help support your understanding and identification of where risk might be occurring proactively that you can take actions against it. So, it's actually one of the key cornerstones to our 2025 research. It's about using, tapping supplier networks and pulling information from those networks and other external sources, pulling that information into, some type of solution that can help you manage and analyze that information, and then actually presenting that to your internal stakeholders in a manner that helps them manage risk better. And certainly an organization like Ariba is in a good position to do that. That's obviously one of the major barriers just with this big data equation is how do we manage and analyze all this data? How do we make sense of it? And that's really where we see a lot of our clients struggling today. We've had some examples of clients that have really built out a supply risk management group inside their procurement organization as a center of excellence capability, purely to kind of pull this information that resides out in the market, whether it's supplier market intelligence, whether it's information flowing from networks and other network partners, marrying that information with their internal objectives and plans, and then synthesizing that information so then they can go and put that information in the hands of category managers so the category managers can go and sit down with business leaders and have, fact-based opinions about what's going to happen in those markets from a risk perspective, whether we're talking about continuity of supply, whether we're talking about pricing risk and the impact on profitability or what have you. Whatever those risks are, being able to use that information, and it goes back to kind of elevating their role as a trusted advisor. The more information, insight you can put into their hands, the better. Now, obviously, when we look at some of the supply networks, there's a lot of information that can be gleaned out there. If you think about different buyers that are working with certain suppliers and getting information to them on supply risk performance, for example, which, to be frank, a lot of organizations still don't do a great job of when we look at the indirect side. So certainly there are opportunities, and we're seeing it already in some of these markets for supply networks to obviously start with kind of the supplier performance piece of this and tap the network community to provide insight to that and help. And from a risk perspective, that can obviously be used to help identify where opportunities opportunities to manage risk better might occur. But there's a lot of other sources of information, and it's really up to procurement to try to figure this out with all the sources of big data, whether it's sensor data, social data, transactional data, operational data, partner data, machine-to-machine data, cloud services-based data. There's a lot of information. And as we kind of, we have a model that looks at, there's kind of these 3 levels of kind of this analytics model. There's the first level of the model is you're really just recording things and you're generating reports. The second level is you're understanding and you're generating information that then can be used for analytics. And third, you're actually anticipating. You actually have intelligence and you're moving towards more real-time analytics so that you can be quicker in responding to potential risk. Now, I mentioned this idea of agility as being key on the procurement executive's list. Now, agility can mean many things, but one of the things it certainly means with respect to risk is, look, you can't avoid every risk event. Some risk events are going to happen. There's nothing you're going to do about them. But you can proactively make plans associated with when those risk events do occur. You have a well-thought-out plan based on analytics to execute in order to minimize the impact of that risk. And we see time and time again, when you look at case studies and you look at the research that's out there, those organizations that are much more agile in terms of responding to these risks where you're not going to be able to avoid them, the benefit they bring is that they minimize the impact of those risks significantly compared to others. So those are some thoughts, Dana.
Excellent. Now, as we look ahead to 2016, we're certainly seeing a lot on the plate for the procurement department organization. Looks like they're facing a lot more technology issues. They're facing change of culture. They're thinking about being a networked organization. Marcel, how do you recommend that procurement professionals prepare themselves? What would you recommend that they do in order to meet these challenges in 2016? How can they be ready for such a vast amount of change?
Thanks, Dana. I think procurement organization needs to ensure that they really help the business as much as it is possible, and also that they evolve to the next level for their own procurement function. And I think number one is procurement functions need to see that they have the right organizational setup in place. The setup needs to fit to the overall organizational line of business structure, what a company has. I think a second component, what I think is very important, is to have an end-to-end focus on the process side. Source to pay is a clearly defined term, but basically it is a little bit different in all the companies. And when you really want to optimize, when you really want to streamline your processes, want to use business networks, want to use strategic sourcing tools, as well as then running in a highly automated way the transactions to leverage the automation potential, what you have in a purchase order invoice automation, for example, then you need to ensure that you have one defined process. And of course, you need to have the right system covering all the different parts of the process. And this needs to be highly integrated, as well as integrated in your entire IT landscape. And I would say then, finally, that you need to also consider the change management. This is the most important component, that you really help the buyers in your organization also to help to transform and to evolve into the next level, into a more strategic procurement function. And as Kurt said about the data, if you don't have the basic data right, you are very far away from driving predictive analytics and prescriptive guidance. So therefore, you need to ensure that you invest also in your talent and that you drive the change management side. I think these are the three components what I would see in 2016. And this sounds easy, but basically I have talked to a lot of CPOs. This journey might take a couple of years, but procurement does not have really a lot of time. We need to see now in procurement that we define the right measures, the right actions to ensure that we can help the business and also create value. And as already mentioned, this needs to go beyond just creating procurement savings. I believe that this concept is dead in the future. I think the value is really what counts, what you can create.
Well, very good. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. You've been listening to a sponsored Briefings Direct podcast discussion on the heightened role and impact of procurement as a strategic business force. And we've learned how procurement leaders can make a much bigger difference in their organization as procurement itself transforms to become a focal point of integrated business services. So please join me in thanking our guests. We've been here with Kurt Albertson, Principal of Advisory Services at the Hackett Group. Thank you so much, Kurt.
Thank you, Dana. Enjoyed it.
And a big thank you to Dr. Marcel Fulmer, Chief Operating Officer at Ariba, an SAP company, and the former Chief Procurement Officer at SAP. Thank you so much, Marcel.
Many thanks, Dana. Many thanks, Kurt. was a great conversation. Appreciate it.
And also
Thank you.
Also, a big thank you to our audience for joining this SAP-sponsored Business Innovation Thought Leadership discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator. Thanks again for listening, and do come back next time.